Hello, everybody, and welcome to the International Conference for Transformative Education. I just want to make sure that you can see me. There we go. Here I am. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the International Conference for Transformative Education. We are in the Global Citizenship tract. It's so great to have you here in the session. So before we start the session, I just want to say kia ora koutou, ko Lottie toku ingoa. I'm joining you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, Burong people in Milau and Phillip Island. Those are our Indigenous lands, and I'd love you just to say hello in the chat. Obviously, if this is watching it recorded, then you don't need to do that. But yeah, let's say hi in the chat and just give yourself a minute to settle in. We will have some questions and answers, so if you have any questions as we're going through the session, please do just pop them in the Q&A or even in the chat, and we will come back to those at the end of this session. So welcome. I will pop a little hello in the chat myself, or kia ora. It's great to have hello. We've got some friends. We've got some people from Australia and Singapore. I'm just looking at two screens, so excuse me when I'm looking off screen. And yeah, say where you're joining from. It'd be great to know where you're joining from. So it'd be wonderful to know which lands you're joining from, which city you're joining from, which country you're joining from. And I would love to know, as a bit of a warm-up, at the bottom in the chat, there is a smiley face emoji. So please choose an emoji. How are you feeling right now? I will choose one too. Oh, great. We've got Nigeria. Oh, beautiful. We've got Alice. Hey, Alice. Find an emoji. I'm having a little look through. There's so many to choose from. Excellent. I've got my sunglasses on because I'm going to go on a holiday tomorrow to New Zealand, so I'm pretty excited. All right, let's get started. This session today, I'm going to share my screen, so please give a little thumbs up in the chat if you can see my screen, because that would be wonderful to know that you can all see it. Give a little thumbs up in the chat so I can know that it's all working okay. Yes, thank you, Alice. Excellent, beautiful. All right, so today's session is called Student Voice, Agency and Leadership, Lessons from Real World Project Design and Implementation. So for the next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to be talking you through a program that's been running for the last 3 years in Australia, and we did do a trial in the USA as well. The program was called the Global Citizenship Ambassador Program. And just to kick us off, if you're joining us live and you're on the chat, please give us a quick description or definition. What do you think a global citizen is? What is a global citizen? I'd love to read out some of these answers, some of these ideas, because, everybody has different ideas about this. While we're doing that, I will be sharing some ideas on a program where students got to do lots of fantastic things, lots of wonderful things, like they got to advocate and amplify, inspire, involve, influence, and educate. So I am Lottie. I'm joining you from Australia, and today's session is really about a program that I had a big wondering, which was how can we provide an education for young people that's really fit for purpose, that is really about providing them with the skills and dispositions that they need for this very uncertain future, and a planet that's under pressure, a planet that's got a lot of things going on, sustainability issues, we've got social justice issues, we've got polarization going on, all sorts of things are happening on our planet. So how do we design education to fit that purpose? Thank you if you've popped your answers in the chat. I love the word connect that one of our audience has popped in there, someone who connects with the perspectives from around the world. Awesome. And this definition from Oxfam, it talks about having an active role. So our young people are not just thinking someone else is going to fix these problems, someone else is going to, be part of that community. It's all too hard, or I'm not sure what to do. What we're doing as educators is really equipping them to be ready for this world and ready for those problems that are turning up on their doorstep. Now, you might have heard of global competence, which of course is one of the new areas of testing in PISA OECD. And it's very, very small, but if you haven't checked it out, please check it out. You can actually see behind me here, we've got the Queensland Department of Education Global Competence Framework, and there are 4 different areas in there, and one of them is about taking action, that little purple box. So global citizens connect to others, they develop respect and understanding. They might learn a language, they might not. They might travel, they might not. But one of the things that we really try and develop in global citizenship education is young people's abilities to take action on issues they see around them. So we want to be co-designing a more peaceful, sustainable, and fairer planet. So this program, just so you know what the context is for what I was talking about, it was a 1-year program or a 3-term program. We have terms in Australia. Each school chose a group of students, so they had about 6 to 8 students per group per school. We had a primary school group and we had a secondary school group. Some years we had multiple sessions. Other years we just sort of had bigger groups joining online. And then we would meet on Zoom every sort of 3 weeks or so, up to 9 times through the year. Our Zoom sessions were 1 hour long. And in these sessions, the scaffolding of their learning was all around them designing solutions to a real issue that they saw in their school. Then they would implement the solutions as well. So this would include education campaigns, creating content, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. It was really important that they just weren't working in isolation, they were working in partnerships that involved community. And what I might do at the end, if we have time, is I'll pop a couple of videos up, but I just want to make sure I've got time to get through everything. So this session is really about some of the learnings from the last 3 years. And, if you want to access a bit more information about it, I've got some guides and some case studies at the end that you can easily access. Okay, thank you very much to everybody on the live chat that are putting their ideas about global citizenship in there as well. Ace. Number 1, learning number 1, students are totally ready for this work. They're totally concerned about the issues in the world around them, but they do need allies. And we know that our schools are, structured with a very sort of pyramidal power structure. So we have, the principal and the leadership and the teachers, and then, we have parents and students kind of underneath that as well. But when decisions are made, it's often made within those structures. So there's a lot going on in the world at the moment for young people. There's some pretty frightening data out there, 1 about the climate, but 2 about how young people are feeling about the climate. So I'll just give you a minute to read through this. And it's quite interesting that government inaction is the most frequently identified factor impacting mental health for young people. Now, this data is from Australia, but the data is pretty consistent if you look across other areas as well. There's all sorts of data coming out at the moment. It's probably unsurprising that on our program, when the students got to choose any issue they wanted, sustainability was one of those things that constantly popped up. It was very, very popular. Sustainability, environmental focus around their school, their local community. Of course, it doesn't mean the other issues weren't important, and some of these projects did sort of merge across different areas. Just for this purpose, where we were sort of trying to find the main focus, we did sort of boil them down to these topics. We always start off asking young people, what are the barriers that they face designing change? So here's some of the answers. And again, we see that word allies. Of course, busy schools is a really big problem. Lack of money and resources is all relative, because you can definitely change make without those. And young people talk to the second point, which is, people don't believe that we're old enough to make a difference. We're not sort of taken seriously enough. Now, I would love in the chat, if you're here as well, to please put the barriers that you've seen young people facing, or your young people in your life, in your classroom, have told you that they are facing. I notice we've got Scotty from Inspired Citizens who does a podcast, which is awesome, with young people. So I'm sure, Scotty, you've got lots to share in this space as well. So what are those other barriers that maybe you're hearing, or maybe they're these barriers as well? But young people aren't waiting for us. Young people are stepping up and doing this work anyway. So there are not only individuals, people like Molly Steer, who at 11 was walking along the beach and saw a straw and thought, what would the world be like with no straws? What would happen to, the sea life in the local area? I'm sure it'd be better off. And she's implemented Straw No More. That's her not-for-profit, and it's impacted many, many schools in Australia, cutting straws out of their canteens. So huge impact. Little 7-year-old Rosie Booker in the bottom left, she was walking home one day and said to her mum, who's our street named after? She found out that the street name was unfortunately named after a colonizer who had treated the local Indigenous people poorly, apparently. So she wrote to the council and asked them to change the street name. It's not just young people who are stepping up into the space. There's whole groups and whole networks of young people. So some of the networks that you may know or you would like to check out, we've got Youth by Youth over in the UK that are doing amazing work in the education space. They're advocating for education to change from young people's perspectives. Youthtopia was started off by a couple of sisters who founded Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And what's really cool about Youthtopia is there's lots of videos and resources on their website. So if you've got young people in your life that want to make a change, they can go on there, they can learn how to do it. It's all youth teaching youth. Bottom right is Seed, amazing Indigenous mob here in Australia that are advocating Indigenous perspectives on the climate crisis. And doing really great work. So young people are mobilizing already without us. But there's many young people that do want to do more and are working within schools and education systems. So they need allies. That's number one. Number two, active hope. So hope needs to be an active state to empower students. Dr. Jane Goodall has written a fantastic book called The Book of Hope, and there's another book called Hope as a Verb. Now, it talks about hope to the point that we don't just sit around and hope. It's not this sort of abstract idea. Hope is a conscious choice that we keep stepping up and tuning in and making an effort and encouraging others. And what's really interesting, there's an organization in Australia called cool.org, and they've done some work with Harvard University. And what the research shows is that action makes hope happen, inspires hope to happen, and hope inspires action. So it's actually cyclical. Check out their resources if you don't know them. And the young people are really inspired by having this opportunity. They really want to do this work. And so when you kind of step back and create that space for them, they're really ready for this work. They know that there's a lot going on in the world. They know there's a lot going on in their local communities, and they know there's a lot going on out in that wider world. And let's be honest, there's some pretty frightening headlines out there. I mean, things like, a couple of months ago, this headline on Reuters, UN climate chief says 2 years to save the planet. Young people are seeing this, and they're also seeing information that's maybe not 100% factual and is very emotional sometimes as well. So they know that there's a lot going on out there, and they know we don't want them to have climate anxiety. We don't want them to feel disempowered about their own futures. We want them to feel empowered, like they're ready to step into that space, and they've got the tools to do it and the confidence to do it. So there's sort of a double-edged sword there. They need both as well. Thank you everyone who is popping their challenges in the chat. I'm just taking a minute to have a quick read. Yes, so we've got not enough resources and tools. So young people are saying they need more resources and more tools. Now, young people on our program and other programs that other organizations run are it's really important that when they choose their issue to have active hope, it needs to be real, it needs to be tangible, it needs to be something they can see. So we ask them to choose an issue they can see. We ask them to choose an issue they care about. We ask them to choose issues that others also care about, because that's going to help when you mobilize people. It needs to be something you care about first and foremost, but also considering what others care about, and obviously something that needs improvement. And this issue around what other people care about, this is where inclusive mindsets comes in. It's really important. On the program, we call it inclusive leadership. So young people having the tools and dispositions to choose an issue, address how they are going to, design the solutions, get feedback on that issue. So constantly empowering them and giving them the tools to consult with others and to be open to changing their own ideas, making sure that they're hearing a variety of voices so the solutions they're choosing are not biased, because everyone has bias. The third point we have here is student voice, agency, and co-design. Now, there's a lot of things going on in this space in education. Student voice and agency here in Australia, there's a lot of talk about this in schools at the moment. And co-design is something that is really starting to be talked about more openly, and sort of, I think it's becoming a bit more of a mainstream conversation. Now, I'd be really interested if you are in the chat, please pop in there. What are your thoughts on co-design? Are you familiar with co-design? Is the school that you're working in, or the schools that you're working with, using co-design? Because this is something that, is happening more and more at a mainstream kind of conversation in education. So when we're talking about student voice, like them having the platform to share their own ideas and thoughts, student agency, them driving that work, and then the co-design where they're working alongside educators or adults in a shared position of power and decision making together. These are learning experiences for everyone. Okay, so it's not just the students that are learning through this. Everybody is learning together in this space. So students can be educators. They become the expert educators. They create videos. So for example, if they're choosing, they choose plastic recycling, which is quite common in issue selection. So students might become absolute experts in, why soft plastics are problematic, what local biodiversity impacts it has on the local flora and fauna. And one secondary school I worked with, they found out that in their local river, there was a platypus population there. So the rubbish from the school that was going through the school gates and ending up in the river was actually impacting this population. So their education campaign was really directed at helping that local platypus population. And they didn't know it really at the start, and neither did their school. So that was a really powerful thing that they could do to educate other people. Students as learners are going out to the community, having community experts come in and them learn about issues from those experts that they just don't have access to in school. And this is why community connections is so important. And of course, students as partners, so students working together where they're bringing their expertise and the community are bringing their expertise, and they're working together. And some of the schools I've worked with this year have done beautiful work in things like rubbish audits. So the students have kind of informed the local council on their context. The local council's empowered them with the tools to do a rubbish audit, and then the students and them and the council have worked together. So you're working together in partnership, and there's lots and lots of examples of that. I'll give you a moment just to read Jack and Sailor, and their project was addressing mental health. So these young people's project was called Mad Chatters Morning. It was a fantastic little project. The school, the grade 5 students identified that mental health was an issue for their peers, which is becoming more common. I'm working across many schools where young people are saying mental health is an issue, and it's really heartbreaking that we're hearing that at all from young people, but it seems to be quite young. With the students, they were saying that many of their peers were asking to see a school counsellor. And so they were like, well, why does everyone want to see the school counsellor? So what their project was they decided to design some meaningful mental health check-ins, and they advocated for homeroom morning time, 15 minutes every week, to be devoted to this. And then they worked with a trained psychologist to develop age-appropriate conversation cards. So the students did all of this, and it was implemented in school. And so for the rest of the year, it's sort of by the time it sort of came around, it was towards the end of the year, but it's still being used. Young people are having these conversations, and they're using a system that their peers have implemented. So it's pretty exciting. This is Roger Holdsworth's diagram. I really like it just because I think it shows us that we often hear about student voice and student agency, but if we're all learning together, it's really about student participation and student-adult partnerships. And the key word there is collaboration. Of course, because we're all learning together, it absolutely is about the educator walking that tightrope. And sometimes there are challenges around how much support to give young people to make them successful, but not make it so easy that it's not their project. And sometimes, particularly in primary school, we want to protect our young people. We don't want them to kind of, go through unnecessary hardships. But, really, what is your role facilitating it? And that's a bit of a tightrope that sort of seems to come up. So we have seen a lot of positive feedback, and all the educators over the last 3 years that have taken part in this. We've had around 60 schools in the last 3 years. So that is about 80 to 90 teachers. And the feedback is consistently that they feel more confident doing this work after the program because they've been immersed in how essentially to run it. Number 4, systems thinking. Getting to the heart of issues enables effective problem solving. Now, we've heard a lot about design thinking in schools in the last sort of, I'd say, 10 years, maybe less, maybe more for some schools. But systems thinking seems to be making a really big emergence in the conversation around really understanding the world, so really getting to the heart of issues and enable effective problem solving. I'm going to do a quick shout out to Compass Education, who have fantastic tools in this space, and I will pop that in the chat in a moment, or if somebody in the audience knows it, please pop it in the chat. You may know that Zoe Wheel's work, the Centre for Humane Education, and this is a whole area in itself about how do we essentially move from sort of humanitarian responses, doing good, responding with empathy to real issues, to really solving those issues, being what she calls in her book a solutionary. If you're in the USA, shout out to their work, the Centre for Humane Education. They do fantastic work. So we're moving away from this very linear thinking to really understanding the complexity of issues so that we can start to address them and design solutions that really start to impact those. If we don't understand the issues properly, if we don't understand the complexity of issues, it's very hard to design effective solutions. Things like the root cause identification. A lot of educators use the root cause tree. We've got the fishbone, the 5 whys. And number 5, moving beyond theory to practice. So moving beyond designing solutions to actually implementing solutions. This sounds probably obvious, but there's a lot of design sprints out there, and I run design sprints, and they're really awesome for teaching a certain set of skills. But if you have the space and the time and the curriculum, and I know that's something somebody in the chat said is hard, please allow students time to implement their solutions. So we've got, with our design thinking process, the implementation is that last stage, and we're not kind of working in that discovering how this goes without getting into that implementation. So it's not a design sprint. Without the implementation, we can't problem solve those real problems as they arrive. That provides such deep and rich learning. I mean, that's just fantastic. It can be a little hard to navigate as an educator, like I was saying before, with like walking the tightrope, particularly around planning. You're thinking, how much time to allow for these projects. But, and unfortunately we don't have time today, there's so many amazing stories that come back from schools around the problem solving that happened when the fundraiser didn't work, and then the students had to go back out to the community and find the resources they need and source them. All those things that young people come up against, and then they have to have resilience and grit and really push through them as well. So lots and lots of challenges come up. I think also time management is one that young people often mention. Problem solving is huge, and also just that belief in themselves as, I can do this, I'm a leader, I can step up into this space. Right, so digital storytelling is part of their implementation. And so again, another quite big area, but really encouraging young people to create content for purpose. So we're not just creating a poster, we're creating a poster, if we have a look in the middle here at this one, that shows the problem. You scan the QR code, it takes you to the website that the students designed. On the website, it shows you what a nude food lunchbox looks like, because that's their solution. They write the calls to action, they create the websites, they create the social media posts, they step up into that space. They create, if there's a t-shirt, there's a purpose for that t-shirt. I love this bottom right, the school spectrum in the USA. They actually had a young person say, I want to have a social media manager role, and I also want to write a media release and tell the local community about our project. And they got 3 newspapers wrote stories about their project. So they were so excited. And then their calls to action became acted upon by the wider community as well. Last one, moving from the what to the how. Sorry, second to last one, moving from the what to the how. So the SDGs is something that a lot of schools are using, but really moving that focus from this, like, we're building the house, this is the beautiful house that we want to build, to we want to understand the skills that we're using to build the house. Okay. And there is a movement of young people and schools working in the IDG space. The IDGs really encourage us to, instead of looking outwards, to start to look inwards and think about what needs to change. And if you do the root cause analysis, the answer is always change inside, being less selfish, being less apathetic versus, putting an extra rubbish bin here. The rubbish bin's important, but human behavior change is really key to everything. And as I mentioned earlier, inclusive leadership. So really encouraging our young people to consult with the community, to think about whose voices are not being heard, to really break down the community. The outcomes are fantastic. We're seeing amazing outcomes, and we're seeing projects that are continuing on 2 or 3 years into the projects. We're seeing increased capacity for the educators to facilitate the learning, young people's ability and confidence, designing and implementing the projects. Changed identities is one of my favorites, when the young people say, I actually feel like a different person. I am a change maker, with that confidence and ability as well. We also have things like reported development in a huge range of skills, and we've got heaps of data on all of this: critical thinking, creativity, problem solving. We've got school organizational challenges as well. So we have schools that have systemic changes, things like introductions of nude food days, composting systems, new approaches to social and emotional learning timetabling. And these are not things that happen once, they happen every week, every day. So there's huge impact on all of these things as well. I love hearing that schools are changing their systems, that they're listening to young people more, and this is really one of the outcomes from it. So just to wrap up, because we're on the half hour, we've seen a huge community response to these young people. We've been invited to speak at conferences, and young people have been doing the speaking. We've had newspapers do stories. One of the schools won Environmental Citizens of the Year. There's been a really positive response to the community. I mean, people love supporting young people. So my last words of advice to you as educators is, please take the time to think about how this might be relevant to your context where you might do this work. I've developed a flip book of lots and lots of case studies, so you can have a little look through. They're all in different sections. If you scan the QR code, you can find it. And if you scan this QR code, it takes you to the same place. I've also got a free guide. It's 7-part, 7 stages to developing a student action project. All the tools, resources, ideas that I've talked about today. You can send me an email, lottie@lottiedowling.com, or find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And I do believe that brings us to the top of the half an hour. Thank you for dropping in if you came. It was a short and sharp half an hour, and I was trying to pack a lot in there. Please reach out if you have any questions. Also, a big thank you to ICTE 2024 for the invitation to come along and the wonderful conference. Go and check out the other conference tracks. There's some fantastic sessions coming up. Go and check out the schedule, the other GCE and SEL sessions as well. With that, I will wrap up. But thank you so much, ka kite anō, and I will hand back to our team at ICTE. Thank you, everyone. Please just pop any thoughts in the chat, and I will pick them up there.
I am Nijha,